Always true.
The International Atomic Energy Agency was created to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy and prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. But in today's world, that mission appears to be in peril. The nuclear deal with Iran remains stalled. North Korea continues its weapons program, and Russia's war in Ukraine has raised new fears over nuclear conflict. With wars reshaping global alliances, could 2025 be a turning point for nuclear diplomacy, or will more countries turn to atomic weapons to secure their interests? The IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi talks to Al Jazeera. Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. You've recently been to Iran, and the Iranian officials said that they were willing to halt the expansion of their stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Have they delivered on that particular promise to you?
That was part of a process, part of a conversation. It was my first trip, not to Iran, I've been there many times, but with a new administration, met with President Pezeshkian, with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, Vice Minister, a whole lot of people. And as part of that conversation, I invited them to consider this as a measure that could project some confidence and indicate in a concrete way their readiness to take seriously the concerns that exist out there about this specific activity, which means that you are enriching uranium at a very, very high level. 90% is the military level. They agreed. They agreed, and they implemented it, albeit for a few days, because as a result of a resolution that was adopted by the Board of Governors of the IAEA, they decided that they would not continue with this voluntary measure that they had agreed to implement at my request. So in reality, there was a short-lived measure, but it indicated, at least to me at that time, that they were listening, that they were paying attention to my indications that this activity is an activity that it's not irrelevant. Mm-hmm. They are the only ones in the world, apart from the countries that do have nuclear weapons, so that the concerns that exist are legitimate concerns, and that at that time we evaluated that it would be a good gesture after my first trip there. Mm-hmm. So I appreciated the fact that they listened to me, but of course the process continued its own logic, and of course I don't take issue with countries wanting to censor or not Iran. This is a matter for member states to decide what they do, and there were other considerations. But in answering your questions, this was the situation around this.
Yeah, because there was a moment when they said they were very frustrated over one of the reports that was issued by the IAEA, and they said that they were going to activate new advanced centrifuges, particularly in Fordow and Natanz.
If I may correct you, mm-hmm. Their frustration was not on my report, although they don't necessarily like mm-hmm. the reports, but on this particular occasion was at the adoption of a resolution, exactly, which was censoring Iran and saying that Iran should cooperate with me, with the agency, etc. So that they took this as a sort of a reply or a retaliation of sorts to this measure that they considered incorrect.
You said that Iran now has about 200 kilograms of uranium enriched to near bomb grade. Mm-hmm. Give us a sense of what does that mean?
Well, that means that they are very near to have the amount which would be necessary to move to the development of a warhead. But, and I have to be very clear not to confuse your audience here, they do not have nuclear weapons. And from that to move to the step where, or to the place where they would have an operational warhead, there would still be a number of technical steps, some of them quite complex that should have to be taken. So we need to be objective. This is a serious matter. Having the material is a huge step in a direction that is of concern. But that doesn't mean that they are there.
Because others saw the statement in a different way, that they are expanding their nuclear capabilities, that they are producing enriched uranium at a pace faster than was assumed, and number three, that they can easily move from a 60% purity of enriched uranium to 90, not necessarily within years, but lesser than that.
But that is correct. The issue is that to have a warhead, I mean, it's not enough to have enriched uranium. You have to do certain things. You have to have a metallized form of uranium. You have to have detonators. You have to have a number of things that are very complex that go inside a warhead to say, well, I have a nuclear weapon, and then maybe test it or not. So there is a segment that is there to be filled, if you want, or a gap. So it is an activity of concern. Having nuclear material at that level of enrichment, where no one is doing that, is also a political signal, and Iran knows it.
The IAEA and Iran have always had an extremely, I would say, how I would put it, difficult or delicate relationship in terms of, there was the case of the traces of uranium in undeclared sites, the restrictions put on the inspectors. Do you think it's about time to reconsider the type of relationship that your agency should have with Iran?
Well, we need to keep insisting that they give us the necessary cooperation. It's our mission. Our mission is to make sure that there is no proliferation of nuclear weapons. And when we see them approaching a red line or doing something that requires explanation, we have to say it. We know, and you're right, in saying that this leads to a relationship that is not always easy. You may have seen them criticizing me very, seriously and taking issue with many of the things I say. It is my obligation as an international organization. We are the only ones there, People are speculating, people are making all sorts of scenarios. What do they have? What could they have? What is going to happen? When is it going to happen? The reality at the end of the day is that by the mandate, given to us by the international community, by the Treaty on Non-Proliferation, by the agreements between Iran and the agency, we are the ones on site, inspecting, going to all the facilities almost daily. So we have a pretty good view of what is there and what are the capabilities. But the issues are different. The issues have to do, as you mentioned also, with the lack of credible explanations about things that happened and should not have happened. Finding uranium traces in places that were supposed not to host any nuclear activity, for example. So where is this material? Where is the equipment that was used? And showing us their centrifuge production capabilities and other things that are very relevant with a future, in a future perspective more than on a past perspective.
So basically it was a relationship based on a monitoring regime put into place, then followed by international sanctions led by the United States of America in terms of breaches of that protocol. But do you think that the concept itself is efficient and could eventually lead to the prevention of nuclear proliferation, particularly as far as Iran is concerned?
It is. You remember perhaps that a year and a half ago, there was a moment where we detected enrichment at almost 90%. And we saw it immediately. Afterwards, we had a technical conversation with Iran. They explained that there was an oscillation. That it has been oscillation or not, we saw it. We saw it immediately. So the inspection regime, the tools that our inspectors have are extremely, I would say, reliable and extremely sharp in detecting these kinds of things. The issue here is more the scope, what we can see, and what we believe we are not seeing, more than the inspection itself. We know that given the time and the space, or for example, these issues, as I was mentioning to you, and you mentioned to me, these traces of uranium, we are able, with our methods and techniques that we have, to discover whether in this place where we are sitting, there was something 50 years ago. You swipe, and then the technologies that we have are so well honed that they are going to allow us to see what kind of isotope of uranium there was, what is the probable origin of that, etc., etc. So this is why it's very efficient. That doesn't mean that is enough when you cannot see all the places that you would like to see, or that you are barred from seeing something because of one reason or the other.
What happens next in Iran is something that could ultimately be decided by the Trump administration. And one of the key allies of Donald Trump, Senator Lindsey Graham, said recently that the Americans should use force to stop or to prevent the Iranians from acquiring nuclear capabilities. Do you have any concerns that we're moving towards more confrontation?
Well, I think, of course, I'm the head of an international organization that is there to preserve international peace and security. So we're doing what we're doing, and we are being as demanding as we are, because we know that by giving confidence, by allowing us to tell the world what is happening, the probability of the use of force diminishes. So this is the political game that is being played here. Some may believe that the use of kinetic force is the answer. What we are saying is, if we are allowed to inspect in the way, with the scope, with the depth and breadth that we want, we will have clarity. And with that clarity, hopefully, the perceived need to do something unilaterally, concrete, material, violent, will decrease.
The 2015 agreement between Iran and the US and the other 6 nations was widely seen as a breakthrough that could be very helpful to you, to the inspectors on the ground, and could be conducive ultimately to a permanent settlement. But you said that you don't think now that the 2015 deal fits the purpose in its current form.
Today.
Yeah.
Today.
Why?
2015 was 2015. We're talking about a decade ago. It seems incredible, but it's 10 years ago. During these 10 years, and in particular since 2018, the nuclear program in Iran has grown exponentially, enormously, not only quantitatively, but qualitatively as well. So now they have more advanced centrifuges, so you need much less centrifuges to go to the amounts of enriched uranium that they want faster, and so on. They have also capabilities in other areas, which make this old agreement obsolete. So this is why, as I say, JCPOA was what it was. Let bygones be bygones. I mean, today is an empty shell. Nobody has declared it dead, but it's dead. What we need to do, or we must try to do, and I hope states can come to this conclusion, and with us helping them, because we are the guarantors, those who are verifying, that we have something that covers what needs to be covered. And what needs to be covered has changed from that time. So there is no political, when I say these things, it's not a political.
It's purely technical.
It's purely technical.
Then it could trigger a backlash from the Iranians, because under 2015, the deal was basically based on this whole notion of limiting Iran's use to 5,000 old centrifuges, and that the advanced ones would be just purely for research purposes. You think this is now obsolete, irrelevant?
Totally. At that time, they didn't even have this ultra centrifuges that they have now. They were testing them. Now they have, I don't want to get too technical, but the first centrifuges were IR1s, now they have 4s, 2Ms, 6s, I mean, the catalog. And they have very powerful machines. I saw them. Although I have my inspectors, I think it is important to see. And I requested during this last visit that you were mentioning, I went to Fordow and Natanz, and I could see the halls where these centrifuges are. And of course, they are state-of-the-art, and they perform.
The 2015 agreement is basically also based on the notion that you place restrictions on the amount of the material enriched uranium that they have in the stockpile. You control the level of purity and the number and type of centrifuges put into place. Is this still a valid point, or do you think this has to be reinvented if you are ever to work out a new agreement?
The philosophy would be the same. The philosophy would be you look at certain technologies, you check what is happening, and in return for that, Iran gets incentives, sanction lifting, etc. So in this sense, the basic idea would be the same. The thing here is what are the contents of the recipe? What are you going to put there? What are you going to be checking? What are you going to be controlling? In what way?
Vice President Jawad Zarif, who is for strategic issues, said that the Iranians, if they wanted to acquire nuclear capabilities, they would have done so long time ago, and that even the withdrawal of Trump from the agreement has helped them in a way to expand their nuclear capabilities. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think it's a fact. I don't know. The first part is a value judgment. It's something that I would not have an opinion on what Vice President Zarif has said. But the second thing, it's true in the sense that the program has grown. As of the cause for that, I mean, that is also a matter of interpretation. Some say it's because the JCPOA was abandoned. It's a legitimate interpretation. I would rather stay away from saying why this happened, or this is a fact. This is a fact. Today you have a much bigger, more ambitious, very, very important nuclear program that you need to monitor and to verify in a different way.
Are you in a position at the IAEA to work out way in advance the breakout time for the Iranians to be able to produce nuclear weapon fuel?
Yes.
Is it a matter of years, months?
It's not a long time. But again, let me reiterate, because then what I say can be misunderstood. And I think we are here to provide clarity and not to confuse people. One thing is to have this material. Having the material ready is a huge step. But then there are other things that they would, in a hypothetical world, where they would decide to go down that road, that they would have to fulfill in order to get a nuclear weapon. But it would be an extremely concerning step, an extremely concerning step.
Let's move to another subject, which is North Korea. Where does it stand now in terms of its capabilities?
Korea is the mirror of what we need to avoid in the case of Iran. Because with Korea, if you want, and I draw the parallel because I think it's useful for people to understand. In the case of Korea, we had, like what we are having with Iran, we had long processes, we had incentives. We even had a small international organization, KIDO, that was created to channel assistance to North Korea, which was considered, it was food, but it was also nuclear technology, civilian nuclear technology, in the understanding that this would appease the desire of the North Korean government to go in that way. As a result of that, the IAEA was inspecting, and then they were caught red-handed. And so they decided to throw everything out the window, and we are where we are. So today, to go back to the question, DPRK has an important nuclear arsenal. They tested 6 times. There's indications that they might be preparing another test, but actually they have an operational and relatively reliable nuclear arsenal. They have the ballistic missile capabilities to put these warheads on and make this nuclear capability operational and a real threat. And on top of that, I think one has to consider that they have been without any external contact or relationship when it comes to this for a very long time. I mean, the last time an IAEA inspector was there was in 2009.
Exactly.
All right, so it's a long time. I hope there could be at some point some re-engagement with them, although one must say it will be a different kind of re-engagement, and we would have to see under which conditions. But this is a matter for countries, for states. There would be a negotiation, and that depends on wider political considerations that would have to apply.
They've been expanding uranium enrichment at Yongbyon facility. For the time being, is satellite imagery the only source that you have to try to establish what is happening on the ground?
Yeah, but that allows us to have a very, very good impression of what happens there. Don't forget that we were there before, and we know the type of facilities they have. So this allows our experts through computer modeling and calculations to have a very, very adequate impression of what they have, the amounts and the activities there. And of course, there's the signature that you can see through satellite imagery.
When you look at the pace of the tests that they have conducted, particularly when it comes to the variety of ballistic and cruise missiles, they say this is very crucial for their national sovereignty and to counter any threats, particularly from the USA and its allies. Do you have any concerns that we're moving towards a collision course between North Korea and the US?
Well, I think this is a wider issue and a bit beyond the task of the IAEA, I must say. But what is relevant in this regard is that this nuclear capability that exists can be projected. So that makes it a real factor that needs to be considered. It's a real factor.
There have been many resolutions by the UN to try to curb North Korea's nuclear program. Some of those resolutions were blocked, particularly by Russia and China. Is this something that could undermine any efforts in the near future to try to curtail this program?
What I would say is that the alteration of the dynamics within the United Nations Security Council, in particular among the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, affects any activity in this area, because from the moment you have disagreements among themselves, perhaps caused by external situations that may have to do with other geostrategic theaters, then, of course, without the unanimity, let me put it that way, and this applies to Iran and everything else, the unanimity of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council is absolutely indispensable to sustain the non-proliferation regime. If there are cracks in that area, then it is going to be very, very difficult for me as the guarantor of the integrity of the NPT to do my job.
Another area which is on your radar screen, Ukraine, which you have visited many times since 2022. There's been military activity near the Rivne nuclear power plant. Is this a major safety concern for you?
Well, it is, in the sense that now we are talking, you're mentioning a nuclear power plant which is within the Ukrainian controlled territory. No, I'm not talking about Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is in occupied territory. So here there has been, and we have been repeating that nothing should be done that might affect the integrity and the safety of a nuclear power plant. In this case, it has to do mainly with the power lines that feed this nuclear power station, which forced or made the Ukrainian regulator to order a decrease in the capacity of the plant for safety, precautionary mention. But of course, everything that has to do with a nuclear power plant, for us, wherever it is a matter of concern. Zaporizhia, let's never forget, is on the front line. So is as exposed as can be. Then So until the conflict enters a new phase, in whichever form, whichever way you define a new phase, for as long as there is active military activity, then safety will not be guaranteed.
When you travel all over the world to convince people on the need to prevent proliferation of nuclear weapons and nuclear activities, what would be your answer to people who will say nuclear weapons are an issue of national pride? If the others have it, we should also have it.
At times of increased international tension, sadly, but it's a reality, in certain parts of the world, in certain regions, the appeal of nuclear weapons has increased. This is a very negative thing. We would like nuclear weapons to decrease and eventually one day disappear. I'm so concerned when I see an open discussion about these countries, important countries, regional powers that are, until now, in very good standing with their obligations vis-à-vis the NPT, put in simple English, abstaining from getting nuclear weapons, although they could have them if they so decided, some of them are saying, well, if, for example, the situation in the Middle East, if there is a proliferation case in the Middle East, and if a country, Iran, for example, gets a nuclear weapon, then we will have to reconsider. And perhaps the moment will have come to say that we need them too. And the probability of a complete unravel of the nuclear non-proliferation regime, which, warps and all, has been serving us pretty well, is very, very high.
There's also concern about plants which generate power for purely civilian purposes. Do you think in this particular regard that small modular reactors, although they are still in the design and development stage, could be the alternative that could be conducive to a longer, protracted phase of peace? And
the question is very relevant because many people ask me sometimes, yeah, you know, all this idea, this promise of the small modular reactors, cheaper, easier to deploy, shorter construction times, etc. So this is going to be very appealing for many countries in the developing world, maybe countries that do not have the institutional or regulatory capacity, etc., etc. And my answer to that is very clear. The IAEA will always be there. There's not a possibility that a country which is within the international order is going to have a nuclear power plant and simply operate it, without us being there to inspect.
Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, thank you very much indeed for talking to Al Jazeera. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much.